Mr. D'Amelio? Present. Mr. Oliva? Here. Mr. McCluskey is out of town, unable to make this meeting. Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. McGarity?
Here.
Dr. Hart?
Here.
Mr. Holmes?
Here.
And Mr. Wexler?
Here. If you take a look at the agenda, we have canceled the two presentations that were scheduled on Unilogic and SEPTA due to some technical problems with the screens, due to the transformer being hit the other day. The power surge blew out the motor of the presentation material, so that'll be scheduled for the next month's meeting. First thing we have is Chief Viola, Police Department Crime.
Thank you, Commissioner. For the month of March, 150 traffic citations, 24 non-traffic citations, 145 written warnings. We had a burglary on North Drexel Avenue, bedrooms ransacked and jewelry taken. The investigation is continuing. 1900 block of Lawrence Road for an apartment, and jewelry and cash taken. Investigation continuing. We have a suspect. Criminal trespass, 1700 block of Darby Road for an open door, nothing taken. 2 subjects stated. Theft from autos are starting again. The weather's getting warm, so we've seen an increase. We did make an arrest from someone who was a resident of the Summit Motor Inn down in the Spring, Myrtle Avenue, Township Line area. And then we had additional ones on Chestnut Avenue, Deer Road, Shawnee Road, and Langhorne, all unlocked vehicles. An attempted theft from Meadowbrook Road, but that's attributed to the first person we have in custody. That's a report.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
Well, mine's more of a traffic issue, something that we discussed, and Dave, maybe it's just for you, that light to make it for the blind woman that crosses at Westchester Pike and Eagle. Do you know what's going on
I
with
think
that?
we had talked about that in
Yeah.
the past. She works at Acme, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, Larry, I think we're going to update those traffic lights anyway, are we not?
Yes, you see that one of the resolutions this evening is for us to move forward with our traffic adaptive. We can certainly update that intersection when we get the permission from PennDOT.
Using audible.
Yeah, we want the audible, that's
I add
right.
a little bit, could I add in?
Sure.
I don't know if, we made 2 Arley grant applications, and one was a blind ped one at Manoa, the other one was the signal on Darby Road at the middle school. We did not get we did not get approved for the blind ped crossing at Manoa. We did get approved on Darby Road, by the way. So this board would have to, like the CMAX signals we're talking about on Westchester Pike do not include that upgrade. So
We will make that upgrade. I have monies in the budget that when we do that traffic adaptive, that we will upgrade that intersection.
This is a
I appreciate
Eagle.
it, I certainly hope so, because it is really hard for that woman to cross that street. She is something's gonna happen.
we can even, I'm sorry, Larry, I don't mean that. We could even run ahead of the traffic adaptive, because that's that'll be a more readily provable and implementable change to the signals than the traffic adaptive will be. So I could talk to you about schedule. But
Yeah, we
run
could
ahead
talk
of
to Mr. Higgins and get a quote.
that. Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I mean, I really feel for safety, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Larry.
Welcome.
Any commissioner committee updates? None? Next item is the discussion on gun violence. Mr. Siegel has presented a resolution, I guess,
Yes.
on gun violence. Would you like to discuss that, Mr. Siegel?
As a result of our discussion last month, I put together a resolution trying to compile sort of the sentiments of the board. We circulated it earlier today, and I know it's in your packets, and I leave it open for discussion in terms of contents.
I have some questions. Number one there, Mr. Siegel, do you know if number one, is Pennsylvania one of those states that prohibits persons convicted of domestic violence crimes? Of course, we're urging states. Should we just urge Pennsylvania rather than all states?
Well, Pennsylvania, if there is a PFA, if you're convicted of certain acts of domestic violence, you cannot possess a weapon. Yes.
Okay, so this one Pennsylvania already does number one. Is that what you're saying?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, so we're urging other states beyond Pennsylvania to do that. I'm fine with that. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
This is directed toward state and federal representatives, so,
So we're going to all states though, right?
yeah. I mean, and as a reality, the best way to regulate firearms is nationally.
Yeah.
Because the typical loopholes are that if you can't do it in Pennsylvania, you can go to whatever, New Jersey or some other state. So the goal is uniformity, and with firearms, it's an area where certain restrictions work well.
I'm just saying under point number 1, the last part of that paragraph says urges that states lacking such laws enact them promptly. So
Yeah.
do we want to, should it be Pennsylvania or do we want to make it the United States?
I'm open to whatever suggestions.
Or federal, I don't know, I just wonder whether it makes sense to, I mean, I think resolution ought to be addressed to Pennsylvania and to federal legislators, not to all the United States. I don't know. Would you agree or disagree? That doesn't matter?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it, whatever.
Yeah, we could just do it federal if you want to make it federal. Or address it to Pennsylvania.
I mean, we do have some federal laws. We have the law, the Violence Against Women Act, that addresses that to a large extent too. So, but it's not uniform across the country.
Have you seen it? Okay, Jim, I'm going to have our solicitor look at that real quick. And then number 4, you say require gun owners to report lost or stolen handguns. Should we say any gun? Why would we limit it to just handguns?
I would agree, yes. It should be lost or stolen firearms.
What, firearms? Yeah, okay, so that makes sense, okay. And then in 6, I would just add the word enhanced before background checks. So they're enhanced background checks. I think they're background checks and then there are enhanced, or I don't know, more extensive background checks. I don't know if we want to call for more extensive, because I know they do background checks in Pennsylvania, but I don't know how extensive they are. It might be just a criminal. Is it just a criminal?
Well,
Chief would know that, probably. Chief.
Pennsylvania.
So if I bought a firearm, what kind of background check would I go through in Pennsylvania?
You'll do an instant background check when you go buy the weapon. That's when when you buy it from the dealer, that's where the background check is done.
But what kind of information would that tell you if you did a background check? Would it just,
Larry, you probably have a little more information than I
All
do.
they do is they contact the FBI, it's a number.
so it's really just whether you have a criminal background.
That's
nothing-
correct, yes.
Yeah. Is there such a thing as an enhanced background check that you know of that does more extensive? Or
None that I'm aware of.
Not
Because
by
they-
state law, no.
No?
I think the issue is if you buy it online or at a gun show, you don't get a background check at all.
Okay.
That's correct.
So obviously, but I think some of the people that I would support it, but I don't know what an enhanced background check would be if it even exists.
Well, if it's something that, somebody buys a weapon, we're not even notified of it. So there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
Anybody up there could go buy a weapon, then we wouldn't know it.
Part of the problem is with background checks, it's relatively easy to do criminal background checks. It is much more difficult to do background checks for mental commitments because those records are subject to HIPAA.
Yeah.
There are other privacy issues. But I think it's very clear from recent events that mental health issues are a factor that has to be balanced against public safety. So I think my sense is, and I've looked at what a lot of other sort of resolutions and municipalities and states have talked about, but I believe this is talking about, that they're,
Just a criminal background check.
criminal background checks don't tell you everything, obviously.
Sure.
And
Better than no background check, obviously.
yes, without question.
The only thing I would add, two other things I would add to this. I would add at number 10, increase funding for access to mental health facilities for treatment of individuals in need of care. And number 11.
You could slow down because I'm writing this down for.
Okay. This is just, I know, my scribble here. Increase funding for access to mental health facilities.
Okay.
Treatment of individuals in need of care, and we can word that any way you want. You can do it more eloquently than I can. And then 11, require training for anyone seeking to purchase a firearm. Seems to me it doesn't make sense that if you're in New Jersey, you have to have a license to operate a jet ski, and you have to have training in order to operate a jet ski, and yet you don't need training, any kind of training whatsoever, to purchase a firearm or operate a firearm. So I would suggest those two additions. As someone who actually has a permit, who got a permit in Delaware County to carry a handgun, and I didn't even know how to load it. So I went and got a 40-hour training course. So I felt comfortable, but that a lot of people get permits that have no idea how to operate a firearm.
I agree.
So I don't know, Jim, do you? You see any? You said it mentions. I'm back to number 1 now.
Right.
State. It says states. Do you think?
I mean, that's purely up to you folks, if you want to do the
Just the.
federal legislators and the state legislators rather than other states. I mean, I don't know.
I'd be inclined just to do it to Pennsylvania and federal, but
Right.
since I assume we're going to send the resolution with a letter to our state representatives and senators and congressmen and U.S. senators. Is that what we're thinking here, Mr. President?
I believe that's what our intent is, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I would add, and we did this when we passed the other resolution, I would send it to the President of the United States as well. I mean, I think it's important to do that, so
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
his administration sees that local municipalities are all over the country are concerned about it.
That's all I had. Many things
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.
Can I just add something?
Sure, Mr. D'Amelio.
How about the bump stock? Want to put that on here as well? That should be on here.
Okay.
We did already do that.
We did, but put it again on here, I think. And one other question, I mean, we talked about mental health, and obviously that it's a major issue in the United States. We have to be concerned about HIPAA, but I don't know if, Jim, you can answer this question. Can we ask that they put on the application for a license, were you ever committed to mental, involuntary or voluntary?
That is on the.
It is on them.
It is?
Yeah, that question is, have you, you're asked if you ever been involuntarily committed. I think you're also asked if you've ever been convicted of certain crimes, or are you an illegal immigrant? It's kind of inanely worded at times, but it's there.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Back to the agenda then. We look at the things for next week. Any comments or questions concerning anything on the agenda for next week?
Just a question on the wastewater management. How does that differ from our current ordinance?
Dave, can you address that first?
The current ordinance requires that we reflect that we pass on the regulations of Delcora, which treats about 1/3 of our wastewater flows, and our flows go to Delcora through RHM and another series of facilities. Anybody that's tributary to Delcora, their treatment and most important pre-treatment requirements apply to that drainage area of this township. What this does is it also adds the other 2/3 of the township, which go to Philadelphia, will be under the same pre-treatment and treatment requirements. And what we do is we put the ROSE regulations in by reference into the ordinance.
Okay.
Essentially, what we did is we added the Philadelphia part, Philadelphia requirements to those people tributary to Philadelphia.
So,
Is there a difference in the Philadelphia requirements?
I can't tell you for sure if there is a subtle, because what really applies to us and what doesn't really apply to us that much is it's mostly pre-treatment, and pre-treatment is industrial. Well, I'm not sure we even have an industrial use in a township anymore. So everything else is, it's the strength of the wastewater leaving your building, which it really regulates. And we don't have a lot of industrial. But there might be a certain subtle anomaly because they're two different wastewater treatment plants, and one may have a little bit different requirement on the pre-treatment, but it won't be substantive.
Okay, thanks.
So this has nothing to do with stormwater,
No,
getting
absolutely
into
nothing.
into a wastewater? Okay.
That's
Just-
the MS4 program. That's the
What's that?
That's the MS4 program that we talk about once a year,
Okay.
the stormwater.
This is just industrial.
Well, no, it's any waste. It's domestic and industrial waste. But my point is that it's,
So give me an example where I would be in violation of this.
if you're in
ordinance.
violation, you were sending, an industrial waste, like you were, if you had a paint stripping facility in your house, right? You're in your basement stripping paint from
Yeah.
your old wooden doors, and you were sending that down the sanitary sewer system. That's not allowed to go into that's not allowed to go into domestic waste. Oh, I'll give you a good one. The wash facilities, car washes that have grit separators. If they didn't have the oil, water, and the grit separators, and that was going directly to the sanitary sewer systems, that could be a violation.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Pennoni. Any other questions on any of the other items for next week?
I have a question about the dog parks.
Okay.
So, there's one part, and Tim's not here, so maybe Larry can answer this. But it doesn't mention Coopertown as being included or excluded, so I didn't know whether,
No, I think if it's on the list,
It's a school district facility.
is it, well, no, it's not really a school district facility, it's.
no, part of it's the township, but if it's not on the list, it is not excluded. So if you're on the list, you're excluded. If it's not on the list, that means that it's included. The only parks that are listed are excluded.
Well, it says here under 2, it lists all the other parks here, subject to the restrictions, canines that are under control and properly leashed, and it lists all the parks. So why wouldn't Coopertown be listed?
Yeah, I'm not
It
sure.
lists community park. What is community park? What park is that, community park?
Community park is at the reserve?
Reserve.
That's a community, okay, that's what it's called, community park?
Yeah.
Okay, there's Coopertown's missing, so I think it should be under 2, Larry, I think.
We'll check on it.
And are we planning to have any kind of those stations where if you have a dog, you have the ability to grab a bag, or we're expecting people obviously to?
I don't believe that we're planning on doing that. We're going to ask the residents to actually,
Curb their dog?
yeah, curb their dogs.
And what was the fine that we decided on? Because I think Commissioner Holmes made us come down on that.
That's in the other section of the animal control.
I think the fireworks we came,
I'm getting confused, sorry.
Messing around with fireworks, not with dogs.
Who's messing around with fireworks, not dogs?
We can simply look around for that.
Let's see what that is.
I think it said up to $1,000, but there
That
was
was the-
no minimum.
that was a fireworks, I believe.
Yeah, did we ever look at the fines for dogs?
Yeah, we did. I think
We did.
I think they're already on the books, and
I believe so, Bill. I think you are correct, that
the first offense is $75, and it goes to $250 or something like that.
What?
The staff is going to have to do, we're going to have to do a pretty good job, although we don't do this often, but we're going to have to do a pretty good job getting this out through social media to educate the community. When we had an issue just this past weekend at Bailey Park, and one particular resident was allowing during an Easter egg hunt, the dog running free with no leash, and there was a little bit of a disturbance among some of the spectators, and the owner was just belligerent, refused to curb their dog. So we're gonna work diligently to make sure that we educate once we get this cleared up.
well, all dogs, I mean, even this ordinance doesn't allow dogs to run free in the park. The only place that the dog is allowed to be off leash is in the dog park up at the reserve. That's the only place. This ordinance is for leash dogs in the park.
But
So-
we need to
We need to get that word
reinforce
out,
this
I agree.
to the residents. And
What's the fine? What is the fine? Anybody find the?
I thought we increased it. I thought,
It's actually, I'm looking, it's 4922, which is already in our animal control section. Any owner or person who violates any provision of the chapter shall shall be sentenced to pay a fine of not less than 100 nor more than 1,000 plus costs, and they can go to the pokey for 90 days. The key what we have to do is tell residents, if they're facing a situation with a belligerent person who's letting a wild dog run around, is that they are to call the police.
Correct.
I assume, John, that you guys want to know about it, and you want to appear before somebody's, getting into a fight.
And what we tell people in the incident, 911, we'll respond. So if the ordinance is on the books, and we'll enforce it if we can get the person.
Is $100 enough? I mean, could we go to?
You're talking about $100 if somebody if somebody allows their cat to urinate in somebody else's garden. $100 is $100. It's a decent fine, and you're up to 1,000.
Well, it's a minimum of 100, right? Right.
Decide the severity of
The problem we have is we don't decide. It goes to the district justice, and that's who decides it.
Why is it a range? I don't understand why there'd be a range. Why wouldn't there just be a number, and then it's a set number, and then the district magistrate really actually decides whether that's...
Because if you're not nice in court, he or she will fine you up to $1,000 instead of 100.
But this isn't particular to
do
dogs,
it, right.
Andy. There's ranges of fines for
works.
every
All
one of our
offenses.
municipal ordinances.
The district justice can increase the fine that you... we said we could say 100, between 100 and 1,000,
There's probably
and then she can pick whatever she
There's
wants.
probably enabling legislation.
But she could pick that anyway, couldn't she?
Yeah, there's legislation that enables you to do this, and it probably says, that it can't be more than $1,000.
Okay. So if the police write a ticket, they're going to write it for 100.
Well, they're going to write it probably.
A citation.
They don't necessarily put a number in there, I think,
We don't,
right?
we don't put a number in those type of citations. We leave it open for the judge to decide.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay,
This is a
okay, that
summary-
makes sense. That makes sense.
Andy, this is a
Summary
summary
offense.
offense. It's
Makes
not,
sense.
you've got statute, we've passed ordinances where we have an infraction and have a fine. And mostly that involves traffic or involves parking violations and things like that, passing a school bus. This just falls under the class of summary offenses, which is one under misdemeanors, and is governed basically by the maximum. You can fine it and the maximum amount of time somebody can go to jail for it. And then it falls within the judge's discretion to do that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. But if you have somebody appear in court, 5 witnesses show up to talk about how this is the 25th time the dog has disrupted neighborhood events and the person doesn't do anything about it, the judge is going to drop is going to throw a book at this person. One-time problem.
Any other questions? I noticed there's something missing under appointments. There's.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Are we still talking about the dog thing? I would make one suggestion to this statute that I don't believe changes it. It says, in section 3, canines are prohibited in or within 8 feet of the following areas, and 3G says all perimeter areas that intersect with these excluded areas. And I would just phrase that to say all perimeter areas where they intersect. Just to make clear that pathways and other areas are fine so long as they are pathways that are, next to the sport fields or part of the spectator field. Just instead of that intersect, I would say where they intersect. Again, I'm confident this solicitor change the nature, but instead simply clarifies.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
What the policy of the school district is with regard to dogs? Is it consistent with this policy, or is it different?
Dogs aren't permitted on any
On
school.
school grounds, right?
Dogs are not permitted, okay.
Unless it's a service dog, I believe. Under appointments, there's an omission on our agenda for next week. I believe the township manager is going to make an appointment of an assistant township manager of Ms. Cuthbertson, so that should be underneath the appointments of the entry-level police
Spoiler
officers.
alert.
So, wasn't a surprise. It's just something that was omitted from our agenda for this evening.
Well, she's right here, we can do it now.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, absolutely. I was hoping
We will have an executive session next week that we'll be putting out the talk to discuss several personnel changes, as well as I have Mr. Pannoni to come to discuss some real estate matters with us as well.
And we need an hour or a half hour for that?
I believe we're going to need an hour.
Okay, so we'll have an 6 o'clock next week, will be an executive session.
There's like 3 personnel issues, or not issues, there's 3 personnel matters to discuss, as well as, I believe, 3 real estate matters to review.
Okay, so that'll be added to the agenda, the meeting at 6 o'clock. Any other questions or anything? We do have some boards and commissions if you know anybody for any of those vacancies. And First Ward still needs a senior citizen rep, I believe, right?
Yes.
Bill, I would just like to add that the Haverford Home and Garden Show is on April 15th. I ask you to go to the Haverford homeandgardenshow.org, and a lot of make and take workshops you can sign up for. It's going to be a great show, so please.
Okay, good.
April 15th from 10 to 6.
And Mr. McGarry, do you have an announcement on that?
So, thank you, Bill. Next Sunday at Annunciation Church, the Kevin Kane 5K will start at 1 p.m. Anyone interested? There's plenty of runners out there, and I'm hoping you're going to show up next Sunday at 1 p.m. Annunciation Church. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGarry.
Can I just-
Mr. D'Amelio.
Commissioner Siegel and I will be attending a meeting on April 4th.
I will also.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you weren't going because you're working.
No, it's okay. I'm good.
So Commissioner Siegel, Commissioner Oliva, and myself will be attending this meeting with PennDOT and our state representatives, as well as State Senator Dallin Leach. And primarily, this is about the traffic impact. And Dan sent a meeting, you sent this email to Senator Leach. We're going to discuss the intersection at the Blue Route Westchester Pike, as well as impacted roads in Haverford Township, including but not limited to Westchester Pike, east to Eagle Road, and Lawrence Road. So the 3 of us will be attending, and
As will be.
as well Dave, right, Dave? You're going to be there? Larry's going? Larry Gentile?
Yes, sir.
All right, beat him up.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
So we'll be well represented. And again, the goal was to try to
Run into it.
solve the traffic issue, or at least improve, not solve it, improve.
Okay. If there's no other comments, then Mr. McGarry?
Can I just say, 1 o'clock is when they start registering. If you've already registered, the actual race, Mr. Hoyt just brought this to my attention, starts at 3 o'clock. So we urge you to come, sign up and register, but the race itself starts at 3. Try to get there by 1:30 to sign up. Because it does get crowded, believe me.
Yes, it does.
Unless you want to get a head start, like Andy said.
Next month. Okay, great. If there's no other comments, entertain a motion for adjourn.
Second.
Motion approved. Thank you, gentlemen.